Following the release of the second interim report on digital platforms and the traditional news media, the news media bargaining code is once again back in the news. And so I thought this might be a good chance to revisit why Australian media is so totally broken and perhaps describe some steps out of things. As far as I'm concerned, Australians deserve a choice of media that is trustworthy and sustainable. And on each of these points, they are unfortunately left short. In terms of choice, as Zoe Daniel pointed out in her notice of motion to the House of Representatives in 2022, by one measure, Australia is the third worst market globally for media diversity. Only China and Egypt have more monopolistic media markets. Perhaps as a result, the media is extraordinarily untrusted, and it is unfortunately only getting worse. This year's digital news report from the University of Canberra shows that only 40% of Australians trust the media, the second worst year on record. News Corp is the fourth least trusted of all brands, not just news brands, in Australia. And in terms of sustainability, the 2019 Digital Platforms Inquiry from the ACCC detailed how, as a result of the changing advertising markets, over a 10-year period, the total number of people working in journalism declined by 9%, and more than 100 local and regional publications closed. Now, despite the $600 million that has come into the sector as a result of the code, in recent months we've seen significant redundancies across every single major media company as they adapt not to cyclical changes, but large structural changes that will see even more of their advertising business shift to the digital platforms. So, how did the News Media Bargaining Code change these three critical measures of choice, trust, and sustainability? Well, I would argue that measured over the long term, it made every single measure worse. In terms of choice, with the lion's share of that $600 million going to the major three media companies, each of them have now tightened their grip on the market with improved technology, products, and access to market. And with Meta now potentially banning news from its platforms, the barriers to entry for new entrants will only get higher. So it seems extremely likely that without emergency action, Australians, particularly young Australians, will have even less choice and access to news providers in the coming months. Now, following the revelations of the last few months alone, I'm not sure the code was needed to further erode trust in media, but I'd suggest that the idea that the funding of public interest journalism could be negotiated behind closed doors with executives from foreign-owned technology companies without any guarantee that the funds be used to invest in journalism is unlikely to have made things much better. And finally, whilst good for short-term sustainability, the code failed to establish a stable, long-term funding mechanism for public interest journalism. Since it was predicated on the lie that Meta and Google steal journalism, it gave Meta an easy way out. They can now just drop news and avoid paying into the economy from which they generate over $1.3 billion in revenue. So where to from here? Well, the government should address the issue of the market failure of public interest journalism by raising funds for the levy on digital advertising businesses. And it's been great to see this topic in the news recently, and that the interim report, in fact, indeed references it. There are numerous options for how these funds can then be used to support a vibrant public interest journalism sector, but critical to improve the general public's trust would be a radically improved approach to transparency. And government should resolve the media diversity issue by adding a specific remit to the organisation running this fund to encourage more choice for Australians. Again, I'm delighted to see this referenced in the interim report. Now, I'd add two closing notes. Firstly, this issue is urgent. The government can't wait months or even years. With the impending threat of AI and other disruption, action is needed now. And secondly, it's worth noting if the government really is interested in supporting public interest journalism outside of the free market, well, once again, there is an existing mechanism to do that. It's called the ABC, but that would keep the money out of the pockets of the billionaires, so perhaps that's not the intention.